Further ado, I'd like to invite our guest to join us for today's chat. So today we are joined by the directors who have been instrumental in shaping the first season of the new CBC series Pretty Hard Cases this year. First, we have Cory Bowles. Cory is a multidisciplinary artist from Nova Scotia working in film, television, dance, and music. His credits include Trailer Park Boys, choreography for the children's show The Mobleys, Studio Black, Juliet and Romeo, Little Dog, and Dickstown. His first feature, Black Cop, premiered at TIFF and went on to earn Best Canadian Film at the Vancouver International Film Festival, Best Narrative Feature at the St. Louis International Film Festival, and the John Dunning Discovery Award at the Canadian Screen Awards. In 2018, he was nominated for the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia Masterworks Arts Award. Next, we have Jordan Canning. Jordan has directed over a dozen short films that have played at film festivals all over the world, including Tribeca, TIFF, and Interfilm Berlin. Her first feature, We Were Wolves, premiered at TIFF 2014. Her second, Suck It Up, premiered at Slam Dance 2017 and won Best Feature Film at the B3 Frankfurt Biennale. She's directed on numerous TV series, including hour-long dramas Saving Hope, Burden of Truth, Nurses, Family Law, Pretty Hard Cases, and half-hour comedies This Hour Has 22 Minutes, Baroness von Sketch Show, Little Dog, and Schitt's Creek. Next, we have Sherry White. Sherry is an award-winning screenwriter, director, and producer who is the co-creator and co-showrunner of the new female buddy cop series, Pretty Hard Cases, that we are here to talk about today. Other credits include showrunning 2 seasons of Little Dog for CBC, as well as executive producing and writing for the ABC drama series 10 Days in the Valley and Netflix/Discovery's Frontier. Other TV credits include The Catch, Rookie Blue, Orphan Black, and Saving Hope. TV directing credits include Pretty Hard Cases, Little Dog, Nurses, and Burden of Truth. Sherry also wrote the award-winning feature film Maudie, featuring Ethan Hawke and Sally Hawkins, and wrote and directed the Genie-nominated film Cracky, which screened at 30 film festivals worldwide. And last but not least on our panel, we have Winnifred Jong. Named 2018 Playback's 5 to Watch, Winnifred is a Toronto-based Canadian Screen Award-winning filmmaker and an alumna of the Women in the Director's Chair and Ryerson University. Her recent directing work can be seen on CBC's Pretty Hard Cases, Coroner, Heartland, and Edlings, and on E1 Global Television's Nurses and Private Eyes, as well as on Hallmark's Mystery 101 Dead Talk, winning a 2020 DGC Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement. Winnifred created the comedic series Tokens, developed with WIDC and financed by Telefilm Talent to Watch and Bell Fund. It was the 2019 CMPA Primetime Throwdown winner and has been viewed over 600,000 times. It also garnered 4 nominations at the 2020 CSAs, 2 nominations at Actor Toronto, and festival selections worldwide. And without further ado, I will also pass it off to our moderator for this session, Amil Niazi. Amil is an award-winning writer and producer whose work has been published in the New York Times, New York Magazine, The Guardian, and Maclean's. She's also the showrunner of Pop Chat CBC, a weekly pop culture podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. We're so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Katie. Lovely introduction. I'm so excited to be hosting this panel and to be talking to all of you. What I've seen of the show looks great. And in fact, why don't we play the trailer now for everyone so they can get a little taste of Pretty Hard Cases.
Detective Samantha Wazowski, Guns and Gangs.
Detective Kelly Duff, Drug Squad.
I had no idea. It's so weird that we haven't met yet.
Do you mind if I get back to arresting this guy?
I finally find my way into this case only to find one of your drug squad detectives is trying to take it away from me. Please, would you let me accompany Detective Duff as, say, partners?
I gave up on partners, all right?
Pretty Hard Cases. New series begins February 3rd on CBC and CBC Gem.
Great trailer, really great talent attached. Sherry, I want to start with you. Talk to me a little bit about how the idea sort of came to be and the inception process getting it to series.
Well, myself and Tassie Cameron, who created it with me, we worked together a lot on Rookie Blue, actually, for years. So we'd worked on a cop show, and then we left it. And several people came to me to see if I would sort of help take their cop show and try and develop it further. And people were going to her, asking her to do it. And I was like, well, if they want a cop show, why don't we do this? Why don't we do it again? We missed it. And we wanted to, like, Rookie Blue was a show about people at the beginning of their career. And we wanted to develop something a little bit more reflective of where we are now, which is, you get at a place in your career where you're doing okay, but your life has kind of suffered for that. And but we wanted to have fun with it. So that's sort of where it came from.
And speaking of Rookie Blue, obviously the tone looks pretty different. But what did you pull from sort of that experience and that process into this show?
Well, I mean, the tone isn't as different as we had thought. I mean, it is different, but I think what's important is the in Rookie Blue, the characters and their sort of wants were always very important when sort of pushing the plot. So it wasn't just the case. It wasn't just about like finding a new clue. It's about what they believe and how it reflects on their personal life. So that's very much how the show is pushed forward as well. It's very character driven.
And obviously, you know, you spoke to sort of people at a different stage in their career, and specifically it's two women. And just curious, you know, what sort of specific, I mean, I can certainly, you know, offer my own insight as a woman in sort of a middle stage of your career, but, you know, what is it like specifically writing for two women sort of at that age and at that point in their career?
I mean, it was good, you know, and it's challenging because you don't want them to, you know, it's policing, so it's sort of more at stake than screenwriting to a certain degree. So you can't make them be as much of a sort of screw up as as you might want to do, because they have to be a little more sharp than say I would have to be. But it was just good to be able to bring, you know, more real sort of emotional experiences to that job, or that those emotional things are weighing on them while they're out doing that job.
Great. And now I just kind of want to open it up to the rest of you guys. Obviously, filmmaking and directing is such a collaborative process. So if I could just hear from each of you on what it's been like to collaborate in the midst of a pandemic where we can't be face to face, we can't sort of have that, like those sparks of creativity that often can only take place when you're sitting in a room together late at night. Maybe we'll start with Cory.
Okay. It was definitely a huge curve. I think actually all three of us, all of us, I think all four of us had actually entered in early with the pandemic, because I think we all had a chance to direct early on another show. It was challenging for sure, and it's always changing. The protocols are always changing. You're learning things, so it definitely breaks the creative flow. But it sometimes it was also advantageous. I mean, I think there's a lot of good things that rose out of it as well. Like there was a different energy on set, of course, but it was also everyone was really aware of what everyone else was doing. So I in a lot of ways, I felt the crews were more tight than normal, you know. Yeah, and we were really taking care of each other, which is, you know, it's not that doesn't happen, but it made the team feel smaller in general, and that was actually nice to work on. Yeah.
And what about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I did, I was in the middle of shooting another show when the world shut down. So as soon as things kicked back in, I went back and finished the sort of 4 days I had left on this show in Vancouver. And then maybe like 4 weeks later, I did an episode of Nurses, and then a couple months later did Pretty Hard Cases. So I had sort of 3 on-set experiences not post, you know, mid-pandemic. And they were all quite different. I think I got a little like maybe overly optimistic when I did the first one, because I mean, it was right at the beginning of us going back, and it was in Vancouver when the numbers were lower. So, you know, we all wore masks and we took some breaks to go outside. But afterwards I was like, this is gonna be fine. You know, it's not that different. We're just wearing masks. What's the big deal? And then Nurses was a little bit more, you know, I say like, oh, we had to wear goggles. It's like, but it was all studio. And then Pretty Hard Cases, I think for a lot of reasons, a lot of location work, getting later in the season. So the weather was starting to turn, it was getting darker earlier, a lot of face shields. That I found, and maybe it was just because it was the third one I'd done where I was just sort of like, I'm so tired. I would get home at the end of the day, just like way more exhausted than normal. And because I think, everything is just a little more uncomfortable. Physically, you're always uncomfortable. People can't hear you as well through the mask. There's like a very well-intentioned COVID guy who's like scolding you when you have your thing up. And so, some of those things, that kind of like sitting around at lunch and chatting, that doesn't happen. And I think that wears on you a little bit. I miss the social aspects of it.
Winnifred, is there anything about sort of the constraints of working right now that's actually been beneficial to your creative process, that's actually sort of helped you, that you might carry forward?
I think people listen very closely now because you have to like be very concise in your direction and in terms of intention, so that when I have the time to meet with Sherry or in tone meetings, you're very specific about your asks. And so I think moving forward, like there's a lot of specificity in the prep that was part of that process with the pandemic. You have to like organize your time with Sherry. I don't get to see her very often, whereas if we were in the same office, I could just pop by and ask her a very quick question and then not see her. Whereas now in virtual world, you have to sort of organize yourself with those questions. So that's really helpful for me.
What's it like to collaborate with other directors on a show like this? I'm always curious how you sort of maintain a cohesive vision, but also put your stamp on each sort of, part of it that you take on. And maybe I'll start with you, Winnifred.
I think I was luckier because I was the penultimate episode. So there was material that I could look at that other directors might not have had an opportunity to. And so as someone who's later on in the season, I could look at that and see what the tone is. It's the first season. And, in first seasons, you're still finding a lot of that look and feel. What's the level of funny? Where are we going with these characters? How are we developing them? So me being directing episode 9, it helped a lot because I got to see what worked and where we were going and have those conversations.
And what about for you, Jordan? What's it like to, I know you work on a lot of shows where that's sort of the norm. Do you find it difficult to collaborate particularly in a time like this when you sort of have to, go above and beyond the usual ways of communicating with your other directors?
Well, I think, the cohesion of a show comes down to a really strong showrunner, or two showrunners in the case of this show, and also the writers that you're working with and your DP. There is a team, who's been hired right from the get-go, who has the cohesion and the vision and tone of the show in mind. And there is, of course, especially in a first season, you're still finding things and discovering things, but you really have to lean on the showrunner and the writer of your script and sort of work together to make sure that you're nailing the tone. And sometimes that changes, but I think, Sherry and Tassie, and I love the writer of my script too, Jill, we were all like a little brain trust, and that I find that the strongest shows have those great creative minds at the top who know exactly what the show is and can communicate it to the directors, no matter how many of us there are.
Sherry, I see you nodding. Do you want to just jump in and talk about like what it's like to sort of maintain that cohesion when you have, sort of multiple directors that you're collaborating with?
Yeah, I'm just laughing because Jordan says she has people who know exactly what the show is. I'm like, no, we don't. I mean, because it's the first season and because it's a hybrid tone. So it's every episode, it's either too funny or too dramatic. And so we have to sort of, be always finessing it and tweaking it. And so, this first season, we had to, like, even when we were putting the writing team together, first we had too many comedy writers and we were putting too much emphasis there. And then if the episode comes in and it's too procedural, this feels hard boiled, it's not the same. So it's always constantly in flux like that. But and even in the edit, that's where we're kind of sharpening it. But, everybody that we hired this year, or most certainly Cory, Jordan, and Winnie, we've all worked with in some capacity or another. So we felt confident that we would be getting people who would do really good work and that would be collaborative with us and open to the sort of feedback and everything, and that they'd be able to straddle that tone.
And on that, like, how do you know you're in the sweet spot in terms of, yes, we've nailed it. Or do you feel like you're always in the process of nailing it season to season or even episode to episode?
I think you're always in the process of nailing it. I mean, it's funny because I directed the finale, and I really thought when I was directing it, I was nailing it, but then when you see it in the edit, you're like, oh, I didn't quite nail it, because it's a really, really challenging thing where it's not just about being a cop show where you're solving a crime. It really is about, it's got to be funny, but it can't take away from the stakes. So but it's amazing what music can do, and so we're getting there.
That's funny. Cory, I want to talk a bit about that straddling of genres, because, and all of you have sort of worked in comedy and in drama and in all the spaces in between. So what are some of the differences and the sort of strengths that you have to pull on to switch back and forth between comedy and drama as a director?
Well, but I guess both. I sort of, and my friends will probably agree, I sort of find both quite similar. Like I find, obviously you have to find the drama in your comedy, and you have to find the comedy in the drama. So I think one of the big things is figuring out the timing, what's being said, what's not being said, and not trying to be funny. I think that's the big thing in really going after comedy. And it's a lot of trust, I think, in this show. We have actors who are constantly searching, and it's a really solid cast, and they're quite funny. Like some of the, some of our supporting cast, they're so great, and you're just discovering that, as you go on and start to allow them to play. So it's really finding, being able to maintain your structure and your focus and maintain the things that you're supposed to be doing, and being able to also like squeeze in that extra time to discover, because in a lot of cases, like, we may not know that some of our cast is that funny, or some of our cast can take such a heavy turn when they come in starting to be funny. So you kind of just, me, it's mostly a lot of just collaborating, negotiating with the cast, and a lot of times you just say, you let me deal with seeing what this is going to, like, showing your drama and showing your gray area, and you just have fun inside of it. And so I think it's you have to really be open all the time, but you have to really have a laser focus on what you can and can't do in the show. Because it's true, like Sherry said, a lot of times we'll go to that dramatic place, and sometimes in the case of an actor like Meredith, she'll go, like, she's an outstanding actor, like outstanding, and she will go really far to a very, very heavy dramatic place, but she does that to get to a very funny place. She understands what it's all about, and we don't really have time to rehearse sometimes, so you have to, sometimes it's, we really have to I have to, I guess, catch that and really honor that and support that, and then we find our funny. So it's a lot of trust.
And, you know, kind of on that note, is it, given that you can't, you know, not everyone can hear what you're saying behind a mask and a face shield, like how much does that change what it's like to direct actors, particularly, as you said, when you're sort of trying to find surprises and actors that can carry, you know, a funny scene and a heavy scene? Is it more difficult right now to sort of be directing actors in particular, given the constraints of the pandemic?
Is that me still or anyone? Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, like, I'm really used to being very, very close to an actor, no matter what. Always being right beside them, right in there, like always aside, and be very private, no matter what, even in a big, large scene. So that, you know, that's pretty hard to, it's pretty hard to negotiate. So yeah, you have to sort of, you know, all of a sudden you have to be okay with sharing the space, and that again comes with trust. Like, yeah, so that was actually a brand new thing for me, to allow that person to, and to feel that it's safe. And we were lucky because everyone did feel safe, but it certainly changed my approach, for sure.
Wondering, Winnifred and Jordan, do you have any sort of tips for directors right now on navigating that closeness and that trust that you would normally want to have on set, you know, as we sort of seem to be going on in this sort of environment for a while longer?
I know early on during the pandemic, I knew that the mask would be a deterrent for communication. And so sometimes, especially on a show like Nurses, which I started and had worked with the actors before, I would reach out via email and maybe develop a relationship with them without a mask, and have that open dialogue prior to prep, so that they knew what I looked like and knew what thoughts I had about the episode were, and feedback in that respect. That was really important, to try and establish a relationship, which is really hard to establish when your only communication is through eyes, really. You know, with them visually, you can get up close and talk to them and whisper, and they'll go, "What?" Or, you know, it is difficult, especially if you're trying to not let the other actors know what you're trying to give them. If you're giving a specific direction, so that the reaction might be what you're chasing in terms of direction, that was difficult. But establishing a relationship prior to really helped.
Yeah, Jordan, I'd just love to get your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. And you know, taking advantage, we were lucky on Pretty Hard Cases. The weather was still like fairly decent. So at lunch, I would usually like go to there was like a little sort of soccer field where Adrian and Meredith would go with Adrian's dog, and I would just chill out with them and hang out at lunch, because, you know, or I'd go sit in Sue's trailer with the door open and me wearing a mask, just to have a little bit of that, you know, not even necessarily talking about work, but just that kind of rapport that you would usually develop a little more organically in between setups and things like that, as opposed to, you know, I mean, on Nurses, it was particularly tricky because there was like sort of pods. So anytime you wanted to like change something about the camera, they would like walk the actors off to the green room, and then you could go in. So there was a real division between groups of people. So, but I mean, I could kind of move between them. And so I would often just like go hang out in the green room with my mask on, just to, you know, just to shoot the shit with people. Cause you don't always want to be talking about work, but you do want to make sure that, you know, you both get a sense of each other's personality, and they feel that they, you know, can trust you and hang out with you and chat with you about things. So,
Sherry, there are a lot of procedurals out there. It is, you know, it's sort of a bread and butter classic. I probably watch, you know, 100 in a month. So how do you keep that genre fresh and exciting while still sort of adhering to what makes them so consumable and sort of bingeable?
I mean, I really don't know the formula for that, other than, you know, I just try and be as honest as as I can. And that's a big thing. Tassie and I always ask, okay, what would you really do? What would you do? Or we'll talk to our consultant and our cop consultant and say, what would you really do? How would it, so that we try to not break our stories or our character beats based on other television. And it's really hard to not do that in the world of procedural because, you know, when you're not a cop, when you're not in that world and you've seen a lot of cop television or there's a lot out there, it's tempting, right? To go, oh, I can just, but we never do that. We try to just get at more of a true, and it might even sometimes be less dramatic, but it still feels more honest. And that maybe is fresh, not sure, but.
Yeah, honesty is always refreshing in the television landscape, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, given that there are so many shows in this genre, what were sort of the ones that you went to and that you watched just to sort of get inspiration from that sort of kept you inspired and challenged to make this, you know, sort of the best show?
I mean, truly, what I think inspired us the most was The Heat with Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock. In that it was fun. It's like an action comedy, a female action comedy. And that was kind of what we wanted to do. And there's not strangely, there's not a lot of comparable shows out there. There's like Cagney and Lacey is the one that a lot of people refer to. And it's funny, if you watch the shows, like the when it first started in 82, it's really leaning on the fact that, wow, these are cops, but they're women. Like, and it's, you know, that's just, it still might not be as common, but it's not where you want to put your drama anymore. But later, the Cagney and Lacey movies that happened in like the mid 90s, they're kind of good because they're getting at like their personal lives and they're working a little, and they're not sort of, they're over that bit of the fact that they're women. But for the most part, we didn't really have a lot of shows to refer to.
Winnie, is this like a new genre for you, the sort of cop procedural, and wondering if you approach it differently than, say, another project that you sort of, you know, spearheaded and written from inception?
Well, the comedy that I've written is pretty much grounded in reality. Like it's pretty adjacent. And I think in a lot of ways, the comedy in Pretty Hard Cases is very relatable. You know, these are the funny things that happen to them, and the characteristics that they have are really relatable. So I think working with the actors, it was always, what would you do? What we'll see, and then we'll just do a fun pass. And I think that was a lot of fun to have these actors who were very creative, building their characters and have that comedic tone, even though it's like a cop show. It's there's that fine line that we worked on. And even in the edit, I would do an edit and then we do a comedy pass on that same edit, looking for little bits that would pump it up.
So before we get to, there's lots of audience questions. This is I'd love to get everyone's perspective on this. You know, obviously, given sort of what happened over the summer with conversations around policing, you know, in the US, but those same conversations did, you know, make their way up to Canada. A lot of shows, including shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Law and Order SVU, sort of opened up the conversation to reimagining what a cop show should look like in 2021. And I'm curious to know if you felt that you had to respond to that, if you had conversations about that, you know, and, you know, just if you felt a responsibility to sort of answer that with this show. And we can start with Sherry.
Well, yeah, we definitely did. And like I'd said earlier, when we set out to make this show, we wanted it to be, women action heroes, in a way, women action comedy. But what that actually means is a lot of excessive use of force. And so we really had to look at that differently. We didn't want to and we just wanted to make sure that we wanted it to be fun, we wanted to have action, but we wanted it to be fair. And we really didn't want the show to be cynical. And it was hard to look at doing a cop show and not be cynical, because you don't want to be oblivious, and you don't want to pretend it's all okay. So we just had to really reevaluate, how can we do it? How can we create a world that is hopeful and that can still feel like it is possible, with also acknowledging the reality of what many police officers are like, and what the whole institution is, and the racism in the world. So, and I think we did that without losing the fun. And in some ways, I feel like the show became much more relevant and important, or had something more important to put out there, So I hope people find that. But we all, it's a learning process for sure.
Mm-hmm. Cory, just wondering if you had thoughts on that, and sort of if you changed, some of your approaches after the summer of 2020.
That's a really good question, because like I see, I approached for the show early on, and I was really excited. I was really excited to do it, and I liked where it was, and I knew, that it's going to change. I'm probably, some people know this, I'm extremely critical of policing anyway. My work is based on, those structures and a lot of the gray areas in that. I think, yes, my approach changed, but I didn't feel like I was leaning into having to make sure, or having to basically police the show into doing that. I felt like the most important thing we could do is, like as Sherry said, it's a learning process, but also whittling away what's important and what's in the script, and what opportunities you have to explore a greater conversation than just policing. And in this case, I was pretty lucky because, my episodes, and the other ones too, but my episodes really spent a lot of time with the main characters having to cope with a lot of different things on the outside, having to cope with their roles as police officers, their influence, and what the youth are seeing right now, and how things are changing around them as well. So it's really about, I found it was really about finding opportunities to whittle away the truth, and whittle away to the truth and to the honesty about what was really happening in the moment. And a lot of times you can't, no matter what we do in the show, you can't escape what is actually happening. And in this case, it's two partners. One is a Black woman, one is a white woman, one is a, single parenting. It's just, you get all of this, and we were finding opportunity, and I was really pleased with their approach as well, the actors' approach as well. They would be more acute in finding clues, and without giving anything. And in some ways that would be very funny. We would find funny ways to approach those situations, and I think that's important, because you could have, and I don't want to run on too long, but I'll say that, there's as many chase scenes in that show that are physical chase scenes. It's just chasing your own, your own conscience as well, which can be very funny. Chasing your choices, if you will, and we could really, we made a meal of those. And in some ways it could be, sometimes cathartic, and sometimes really, really, really hilarious, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that completely makes sense. And I think, we don't exist without humor. So it's certainly important to contextualize the things that are happening around us, with both the gravitas that they deserve, but also with the lightness and humor that inevitably make their way into those
I'll just say one more thing really quick, is that also the show, like the writers and you know, Tassie and Sherry and producers were really looking for that as well. Like they were looking for the ways in, and that was really, like, it wasn't a challenge to be able to find those things. So.
Well, you've all sort of talked about, obviously the show is about, you know, centers women specifically in this world. But did you know, how in the forefront were conversations about race? Because obviously one of the, you know, the cops is a Black woman. And that's, in that world, that's not a perspective that we often get. I would say, you know, it's even more rare than the genre of two female buddy cops. So, you know, curious about how sort of, you know, at the fore those conversations were about race specifically.
Who are you asking?
I'm sort of looking at you, Sherry, because you know, you're.
I mean, we were having a lot of conversations about that right from the beginning, you know, and we did have in our writing room 4 of the 10 people in the writing room were women of color and from very different backgrounds. And so it was very interesting because we would talk about race a lot, and it was really important because I've been in other rooms where you would have one person of color in the room and they would have to represent all points of view. And that's not a very interesting conversation, certainly not for that person. But we could actually because we had an African-American woman, and we had, you know, somebody from Winnipeg, and we had somebody from Jane and Finch area kind of thing. So we had different conversations and different points of view to talk about race, which was really, really good and important. And we just knew, having Adrienne come here from the US, we knew that this was going to be, even before the Black Lives Matter movement sort of climax the way it did, we knew that this was going to be important and we had to do justice. And then of course we had to shift in other ways once we realized, okay, we can't do some of the things we'd wanted to do. But, you know, in terms of how much the characters talk about it, it's there. They talk about it and they joke about it a little bit, but it's, I think it's more the sort of the underbelly of what's going on in their points of view is there all the time, obviously, more than it's talked about.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the audience questions. And just a reminder, because some of you are using both the chat and the Q&A, please just put your questions in the Q&A so they don't get missed. Okay, so let me start here with Kelly. What during the development of the show / story inspired your decision to include their personal lives into the episodes instead of just infusing that into their cases? Did you grapple with the possibility that it could splinter the story? I guess sort of infusing their personal lives into the more workplace drama.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really hard to not splinter the story when you're doing that, because you know, and that's something you're always balancing, because you can take away, you sort of deflate the stakes of the story if, like, you're in the middle of trying to catch a bad guy and you go home and you have to take out the garbage. It's so it's structurally, you know, how the personal stories are in there. It is, we do go home with them, but it's also, we know that they're carrying their personal issues with them as they're doing their professional job. So, you know, it's a delicate dance. It's not easy.
Here's one, and maybe Jordan can field this. If we have a concept and need a writer director to collaborate with, what's the best way of approaching writers and directors?
Well, I mean, I get emails all the time, you know, from writers who have something they think might be up my alley, or you know, and I certainly don't think there's ever any harm in reaching out to someone directly. But, you know, do your homework, like reach out to someone that you think, you know, is in the right wheelhouse to the project you're working on, and, you know, be okay if they don't write you back right away, or ever. Some people won't, but you know, looking at things that have been made that are similar or in the same tone or sort of similar kind of you know, budget or scope, and just word of mouth, just chatting with people, asking, you know, I'm looking for someone like this. I often will write, if I'm looking for a writer, we'll write other producers and say, hey, do you know anyone who's really great with, you know, horror comedy or something? And they'll send 3 or 4 names, and just, yeah, feeling things out.
Shoot your shot. Okay, this next question is, what was the research that went into this show, if there was any, and what were some of the challenges or fears in making a show like this?
Well, the research that went into the show, you know, other than reading sort of articles and things like that, were mostly conversations with cop consultants. We met with drug squad, guns and gangs cops. We met with community members. We met with a few ex-gang members who, you know, there's one in particular who consulted on every script. We met with community leaders, you know, to just get different points of view. And what was the fear? That it wouldn't be good. I don't know. There's always challenges and fears. You know, there's certainly, again, in this time, there's fear, because there's no way that anything you make right now is going to please everyone, or is going to get everything right. And it's certainly being 2 white women creating a show about a Black cop and a white cop right now. There's no way we're going to get it all right. So that's fearful, but so what?
I mean, yeah, I guess, you know, the point's not to get it right. But what do you hope people take away? Like, are you hoping to spark a conversation? Because no one is going to get it right, as you say, but what, you know, other than just that they enjoyed the show?
There's a really interesting TED talk that I forget her name, but she was the Atlanta chief of police, gave, talking about how, you know, when she had a partner, and that she and this woman partner, you know, nobody really wanted women to partner with other women because they thought you needed a strong person. And these 2 women partnered together. She was white and the other woman was Black. And she talked about how they kicked out each other's circle, that they sort of exposed each other to different points of view, and how important that was. And that's something I feel like we're trying to do, that we're trying to show the 2 very different points of view, very different approaches to policing, to the world, different, and that being in each other's lives helps each other kick out their circles a little bit and see a little bit more open-mindedly about things. You know what I mean? I mean, if the show does that, or kind of promotes that idea, great.
That's a good expression. I like that. Kick out each other's circles. So here's another question that you all did touch on a little bit, but perhaps there's some specifics here. How are you all finding adhering to the Section 21 guidelines on set on top of the daily requirements of shooting a series? Can you elaborate on how these requirements have helped or hindered during the time of shooting during COVID? Maybe Winnie, we could start with you here.
Let's see, the guidelines. I mean, we're ultimately, we're trying to keep each other safe. We're going to trace if there's anybody exposed. I think those are the guidelines that make the filmmaking, make the opportunity to film freely worth it. You know, like we're trying to find a place where it's close to what we had before. And so if everybody is feeling safe, they've passed the protocols, they're keeping each other safe, then we can do the creative work, I think. So when I first thought, oh, well, we have all these masks and these protocols and the time delay that it takes, it's still everybody is collaborating to make a great product. I think I mean, the guidelines allow us to keep working, which is, I think that's the thing that we're just following.
So here's one for Cory. What is one of the most useful things that you've done in prep as a director?
Gee, it changes with every show, but I'll say with this one, oh, actually, no, I'll tell you the thing I do most is I'll binge watch something, and I'll binge watch something that doesn't necessarily relate to the show, but relates to some of the themes or some of this storytelling, the style of storytelling I want to approach. In this show, it was actually Atlanta. I just went back to Atlanta, and you know, they're so good at addressing certain things while maintaining a certain tone and being, you know, heightened and sometimes very serious. But yeah, so I found that and getting my mind off of trying to stress how am I going to shoot this one thing, or how am I going to, you know, go away and watch this other thing, and then I come back with you know, with reminding myself that I can look for the subtle details. So that's what I do. I binge watch, and it's really great. Like in morning, night, whenever I get a break, it's good.
You also work with this with a software that you use for choreography, though, don't you? In your prep?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like to block. Sometimes I move chess pieces too. I play with chess pieces and move them around, things like that. Yeah, a lot of pencils and drawing, and yeah. That software, actually, I'll say that software is, you're talking about the shot designer, the movie. That software, I actually used it for choreography, but it's actually for shooting. But it's yeah, it works well to choreography. Choreography always have to be very economical and very space aware, and yeah, it really helps. All softwares and all programs and studies kind of go into each other. So use all your tools and search.
Jordan and Winnie, do you want to just briefly touch on that same question? It'd be interesting to hear from both of you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I always do most in prep is just have a lot of conversations with the writer of the script, you know, and keep going through the script and keep finding little ways, sometimes big ways, to kind of either make something more shootable or streamline something or make a joke a little funnier, and just have these conversations. Don't just sort of be like, well, this is a script and it's made in stone and it can't be changed. I think, you know, that's one of your jobs as a director, to come in and offer kind of some fresh ideas and fresh perspective, even early on in the script, in prep, just with the script, so that, you know, not only are you making your job a little bit easier on the day because you've tackled these potential issues early on and gotten ahead of them, but you're just all working together to try to kind of elevate the material over and over and over again until you're done.
I guess, like I in a lot of ways, I write down my impressions for each scene in terms of what I'm feeling, what I feel in this. And so when I go to talk to the writers about it and the actors about it, we're trying to streamline the feeling of the scene and the purpose of the scene. And so I make a lot of notes when I read each script. So whether it's from a character's perspective, like what they're feeling, what's the purpose of that scene. And so having that understanding of the scene and where it belongs in the script helps me prepare how to shoot it.
Great. And this is again, a question maybe we could start with Sherry on this. Can you talk a bit about the visual style of the show and how you established it and sort of finessed it as you went?
Mm-hmm. When you first start out, it's all conceptual, right? You're talking about it and you're trying, and we had David Wellington actually directed our pilot. So we talked a lot about, if it was going to have a bit of a retro look and what the color was going to be and everything. And, once then you see the cut and then you just, it starts to kind of choose its own thing, like we started to realize it's really important that the characters are in the same frame a lot, because we just would notice in other scenes when it would be like when they were at two different sides of the room and you'd be cutting back and forth, it felt too dramatic. So we needed it to be a little bit more playful. And we have an amazing DP, Kristen Fieldhouse, who is really collaborative and we worked with her, and she would sort of keep an eye to that when working with other directors and just kind of tweaking the shooting style as we go. But it's more challenging because you want to kind of come in with all that figured out, but it's an organic thing, your show and your characters and the world of it. So it does have to evolve. And I think it'll be easier in a second season to sharpen that, because we just know so much more.
This is an interesting one. In terms of the creative, how much is the producer involved in shaping sort of, the end product?
Well, there's a bunch of producers. Well, there's not actually a lot of producers. Myself and Tassie and Amy Cameron and Alex Patrick were the 4 EPs on the show. And then of course, Wanda was the producer, Wanda Chaffee. And I would say we all, we all collaborate and talk a lot, but it's not one of those shows where the producer is actually the showrunner. Like it was a show that Tassie and I were the showrunners, and our producers were really on board and really had a good sense of what the show was, and we were able to speak on behalf of what we wanted, and we valued their opinions. And I don't know, it might be more interesting for someone else to say that, and I'll plug my ears because I am the producer. So I don't know. And it's interesting because, again, some shows, they have a producer on set all the time, and other shows, they don't have a producer, the showrunner, on set at all. And it's different, it's different. On this show, we had less people around because of COVID.
Right.
So that we didn't always have, we didn't have the writer of the episode always on and stuff like that. So Cory, Jordan, Winnie might be able to add to that.
Yeah, Jordan, what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to have Jill, the writer of the script, was pretty much on set every day for the most part, which I loved. I mean, one thing look, there's good things about having less people on sets, and there's bad things. And I do, sometimes it's nice to not have like 20 people around the monitor at the same time, or to have people kind of off on their own, in their own little sections with different monitors. But there is something, you kind of miss about having, the showrunner or the producer be able to kind of just be around a little more freely, because, it's their show, and I, especially if it's a showrunner that I really like and respect, I want to, you know, check in with them. And, you know, I think the more you can be having these conversations, and, you know, there's always things that are going to slip through the cracks. So it's great to have a second or third pair of eyes around. But it was great to have Jill there, because that was, you know, we buddied up and could be that for one another. Yeah, but Sherry and Tassie and Amy, and they're very supportive, trusting, wonderful producers, and they trust the people they hire, and they don't get in their way, and let them do their job.
Great. Well, I mean, the hour's just flown by. So I just want to wrap by thanking all of you for taking the time to answer these questions. Thank you to everyone that sent in a question, all really great questions. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of the show, and it premieres February 3rd.